Hello, everyone. Welcome. I am Regine Gilbert. As she said, I am an adjunct professor at NYU's Tandon School of Engineering, specifically with the Integrated Digital Media program. And I am here today to talk to you about the value of user experience. I'll also touch a bit on accessibility as well as a little bit of storytelling. So, just by show of hands, how many in here are familiar with design thinking? A few of you, yeah? So I think we're all designers in our own way. And what that means is, empathizing about who our user is. Who is my user? How many of you think of that on a daily basis? That's great. So that's where you start, right? What matters to them? And then defining a point of view. What do they really need, right? And then brainstorming, coming up with all kinds of ideas. I mean, I teach this, I work in this. This is, ideas are encouraged. Wild ideas are encouraged. I mean, the fact that you all are sitting on a chair right now, at one point in time that did not exist. That only existed in someone's mind, right? So when you think about all the things that we encounter on a day-to-day basis, they were created probably because there was a problem. People were tired of standing, right? So chairs were invented. So when you think about the things that you all create, I hope that you're all kind of solving problems for somebody. And then you want to build a representation. How many of you build prototypes before you actually launch something? Anyone here? That's awesome. Do you test it with real people or yourselves? Who do you test it with? Be honest. Yourself. Your mom. I think moms are great for testing. But you want to test with who? Who do you really want to test with? Your users, right? Because you're going to get real feedback from them. I'll give you an example of something that I do in my class. So I'm an advocate for people with disabilities, and I want people to think about it as they create products. And so I have my students create an empathy map where they have to think about what a user does and thinks and says and hears. And I have them do it for a person who's blind but also likes to cook, right? Because they do, And so I have them go through this process, and then I have them come up with a prototype. They do a little bit of research, but then I actually have them pitch their idea to a person who's actually blind to get real feedback. Now, those ideas and assumptions that they came up with are a lot of times busted. And that's why it's important for you all to test with real people, because you know the product inside and out. Even your colleagues know the product inside and out. Your mom probably doesn't know it inside and out. Maybe not. Maybe she does. I don't know. But you want to build a representation, right? And prototype it. And then you want to ask for feedback. What worked and what didn't? Because when you're so close to something, you can kind of flow through it, no problem. But when you show it to somebody else and they get stuck and you go, but you should know how to do this, and they don't, then maybe that's something you should think about fixing. So this, in essence, is design thinking. You want to empathize. You want to define, your point of view. You want to brainstorm ideas, all kinds of ideas, and build a prototype and test it with actual people that are going to use your product. So next I'm going to move on to some things to keep in mind for accessibility and inclusive design. And what you want to think about are visual constraints, right? Blindness, low vision, hearing, deafness and hard of hearing, motor skills. Not everybody can use a mouse. Does everybody know this? Some people use foot pedals, right? They don't use a mouse. And if you're creating something specifically for the web, you want to make sure that you can keyboard through it, right? Because not everybody can use a mouse. So that's something to think about. If I can't keyboard a site, I know immediately it's not accessible, right? And cognitive learning disabilities. What movie just came out? Or it's about to come? The Incredibles. Is that the movie? Is it coming out? Does anybody have kids in here? It's out. So this movie came out, and then a warning came out. Did anybody hear about this? So a warning came out about the movie The Incredibles because there is some flash. and the flash causes epilepsy, causes seizures for certain people. Now, this was something that wasn't considered, and this is something that has happened in the past. A few years ago in Japan, I believe, with the Pokemon episode, there were 700 kids in the country who had seizures watching an episode of Pokemon because it was flash. So if you notice beforehand, there's actually a warning about that. So that's just something to think about. Who is your audience, and who could your audience possibly be? It could be beyond the scope of what you initially think about. So this is an actual text message. So I mentioned to you all the exercise that I give my students with the empathy map for creating an empathy map for somebody who has low vision. Well, this was specifically for color blindness, but I think it's very, very interesting. So this was a message from a father to a daughter. I don't know if this is something you're doing, but this is something you and other graphics people should know. Do not ever, ever, ever make charts and graphs with color-coded areas or bars. I cannot come close to understanding those if there are more than 3 colors. Just today, I was reading an article that has a bar graph with about 6 or 7 colors, and I gave up after 2 seconds. Color-coded charts and graphs are just another way for the man to keep the brother down. Mind you, he wasn't a brother, which made it more funny. And he said, don't use colors, use patterns. Colors look pretty, but they are completely unintelligible. So for my student, this was her father, and she knew he was colorblind. It was a ongoing family joke with them. When he sent this text message, I said, can I please use that? And she said, oh, absolutely. I've been using it for a couple years now. It's still good, and it gets the point home, right? Because we all want to be able to understand what we look at. So what do you all see when you look at this? You could just shout out. Stairs and a ramp, a way to get up. Who can use this? Everyone. It's complex. How will people enter or exit here? Depends on if they have a wheelchair or not. Right? Stroller. And how does this apply to the print, web, and physical worlds? This looks accessible because there's stairs and a ramp and there's a couple rails, right? However, this is not actually accessible. And part of the reason is I want you to think of a rainy or a snowy day and somebody with a walker at the very top. Would you feel comfortable with your family member going down that? Would you feel comfortable actually pushing your child down with a stroller down this ramp? Could you actually get up this ramp if you were on crutches? So this goes to show that just because something looks like it's accessible does not mean that it is. And this is oftentimes what we do on the web. This is oftentimes what we do in print, is we make something look good. We make it, it might pass some of the tests, but a lot of times we haven't actually tested it with real people. And when I first looked at this, I thought it was accessible, and then I realized it's not actually ADA compliant because there's not rails along all the sides. There's only rails along certain steps there. So that's just something to think about, right? The things that we make. So do I have any football fans in here? 1, 2. Okay, American football, because, obviously World Cup is happening right, Brazil's playing right now, and I think they're winning, I don't know. So I like football in part because I grew up with 3 brothers and a father who all played, and if I wanted to talk to them during certain times of the year, I needed to know what was going on with football. So in particular, I happened to be watching a game, and I like to be on Twitter. Does anybody else do sports on Twitter? I find it very entertaining. Am I the only one? People are hilarious. So I was watching this game. And it was back in 2015, it was the Buffalo Bills and the New York Jets. And during the game, I started noticing texts where people were getting mad because the Buffalo Bills were wearing red and the New York Jets wearing green. So one says, and this might be harder for people, so I'll read the slides. It says, this matchup is a colorblind person's nightmare. Teams are blending into each other, or blending together. The second slide says, if you are colorblind like me, this NFL game is going to be hard to follow. And this one said, for the 8% of American men like me who are red-green colorblind, this Jets-Bills game is a nightmare to watch. No idea what's going on. Do you know why? Anyone in here? Yes. Yeah, so red and green color blindness, about 13 million people in the United States are red-green colorblind. This is how they saw the game. So you could not tell which team was your team, right? And so what happened was afterward, the NFL came out and said, through our testing phase, we did forget about colorblind users. And so therefore, in the year 2016, they came out with white uniforms. So if anybody the 3 people that are in here that do watch the NFL, if you do, now you know why there's white uniforms. There's white uniforms because you can tell the difference between a color and white, right? So user experience is truly everywhere. How many people know what UX is in here? A few of you? Yeah, like 1, 2, 3. That's good. Well, if you ask 5 different people, they'll tell you 5 different things. So I will tell you what my definition of UX is. My definition of UX is that it's a feeling. Either you feel good using something or you don't. There really isn't a middle ground. How many of us like doing forms, filling out forms? Anyone in here? Has anybody found a good way to make those a pleasurable experience? Not really, right? Try to do them on your phone? Right? They're not meant, you just know you're going to just do it when you get back to your laptop. You're not going to do it on your phone. So it's everywhere. It's considering others, right? And what could be best for them. So now I'm going to move on to storytelling. How many of you are storytellers in this room? Yes? No? I think we all are storytellers. Come on. Yeah? Yeah? I picked this quote because I liked it. Those who tell the stories rule society. Right? And a big part of UX is being able to tell a story. It's being able to tell a story to your stakeholders. It's being able to tell a story to your team, right? It's being able to tell a story to your users for when you interview them or when you're questioning them, however that goes. So it's really, really important to tell a good story. I think when you all leave here, you'll remember 1 or 2 of the stories that I gave you, either the football one, right? Or the father-daughter, right? And when you tell people stories, they are more likely to remember. What's your favorite movie over here in the corner? Lion King. I love the Lion King. I can't really do it. But why is it your favorite movie? What was it about the Lion King? I mean, the Lion King has been on Broadway for what? 20 years, over 20 years at this point. Because it's a good story, right? It makes you feel something. There's a reason why we see babies and dogs. We feel something. So when you think about telling your story, right, and how can you make sure you're including your users, right, in that story, in the story that you tell about your product, right, and the stories that you tell to people who maybe want to buy your product. What story are you telling? It's very important. So next, I'm going to move on to some design tips for you all. So what does it mean to be an inclusive designer? One, like I said in the very beginning, and a lot of you do, think about who you are designing for. You want to get to know who you're designing for, right? You want to make inclusive design a part of the process, right? And design for uncommon uses first. This is something people don't often do. But if you think about your users who have uncommon uses, a lot of people don't think about people with disabilities using their product, but they do, right? So think of those uncommon uses first. You want to design with clear affordances. You want to make sure that you're clear about where is the person going to click? Where are they going to go next? Am I being clear about what the user flow is? And then you want to assure that color contrast is clear enough. Because a lot of people, you think they may see a certain way, but no one honestly will tell you. How many of you wear glasses or contacts in this room? You are using an assistive technology, right? For some of you, without your glasses or without your contacts, you wouldn't be able to see, right? I have friends who wake up in the morning, if they don't put on their glasses, they cannot function. So you want to keep that in mind. And here's some tools. Wave tool, they have a Chrome plugin. There's No Coffee, Axe, there's Color Contrast Analyzer, and Chrome Accessibility Developer Tools are pretty good. So why is UX valuable? One, you can increase your overall project success rate. You can reduce development costs. A lot of you do testing, but you do it internally. I highly recommend doing it externally, right? Getting just even if you got 5 people to test your product that are external to you or not your mom, right? It would be helpful. And potential increased revenue due to stronger user adoption. So if you test externally and you find out what works and what doesn't, then you'll get better adoption once you actually do release whatever you're going to release next. And practice makes perfect. You want to set up a practice of incorporating inclusive design into web applications. You want to select content and development tools that support inclusive design and look for opportunities to integrate user experience throughout the process. Don't just wait till the end, right? I've had so many people say, oh, can you look at my thing? And I say, sure, I'll look at it. And I tell them what's wrong and they go, well, it's too late. We've already built it, right? I mean, so many times I get that. Most recently, I actually had a student built a product and he said, can you review it? And I said, sure, I'll review it. And I told him things that were wrong and he goes, but we can't fix that. And I said, well, okay. He's like, don't tell me anything major. Just tell me the little stuff. And I go, okay. And he said, be nice, because oftentimes when we are creating things, they are our baby. We spend more time sometimes creating these things than we do with our family. Right? So why wouldn't you go and test that with people before you release it, right? It just makes sense. It's the right thing to do. So to end, I like to ask this, and we'll spend just a couple minutes. I'd like you to talk to people that are next to you or behind you, and just think about how, because I'm going to call on you, but how might we make better user experiences? It's super generic, I know, but there's going to be some good answers that come. So we'll spend a couple minutes. Talk to the person in back of you, in front of you, just for a couple minutes. How might we make better user experiences? All right, everyone. That's been a couple minutes. How might we make better user experiences? Does anybody want to yell it out, and I'll just repeat it? Yes.
Users should not click multiple times for the day-to-day stuff. It should be pretty quick, like using some templates or something very direct.
So users should not have to click multiple times to get to where they want to get to, essentially. And a possible solution to that is using a template that is easier for them to get to what they need to get to, right? It's always thinking about the user's end goal and keeping that in mind, and how is the easiest and fastest way for them to get there. You know how short our attention spans are these days. You get pinged every few seconds, right, by some Slack message or some other notification. So how are you keeping people on that track to reach their end goal? It's a good answer. Anyone else? Yes, back here. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. So what you were saying is to get user feedback early on in the storyboard phase, in the prototyping phase, before you actually make it. I'm a huge fan of that. Actually, I encourage my students to sketch by hand, whatever it is they want to do, and then have people actually go through that hand sketch. And a lot of people are like, well, if I'm a UX designer, I need to just design it and sketch or whatever, whatever they're using, whatever tool. And I said, but then you look at what Airbnb, so if you look at Airbnb's design blog, what they did was they are now taking actual hand sketches and turning those hand sketches into code. Right? So you're skipping that whole step of like the whole prototyping phase in that regard. So that hand sketch that you could actually test could be very valuable along the way. So I'm going to be wrapping up here, and I like to end with this quote. I am the wisest woman. It is a Plato quote, but I am the wisest woman alive, for I know one thing, and that is that I know nothing. Never stop learning, right? You're only as smart as you are, right? You know what you know. So never stop learning. And thank you for your time. Really appreciate it.
All right, so we have a couple minutes for some questions. So
Just walking off.
if there were any members of the audience that had any questions, feel free to raise your hand.
So I'll ask the important question that's always kind of come to mind. How do you know when the design you started with, like based on your initial experience testing, is not the one you need, because people also change their habits. So in some sense, what you put out there causes them to change their behavior. And now, like, how frequently do you actually go and reevaluate your designs?
Well, truthfully, as a species, as a human species, our behavior doesn't change as often as we think. The technology is changing quite frequently, but the way that we behave doesn't change so much. So that's part of what a user experience expertise is having that understanding in human behavior. And for you all, data is so important, and data is so important in understanding people's behaviors, right? And so it's looking back at those behaviors and seeing if those align with the product. Any other questions? Yes.
I'm a software engineer, and we don't have any dedicated UX designer that I can work with. But I think a lot from the user experience perspective. What is the easiest tool that I can use before I develop something to other than the hand sketch? Is there any easy tool available that I can use to design my UX and show to my team?
Sure. I mean, there's a ton of tools out there. You can create prototypes using Sketch and Envision or Marvel or Zeppelin. I mean, I could go on and on. You could use Balsamic. There's so many different tools you can do to create essentially a mock-up and then a clickable prototype. And I think that is like the cheapest and easiest way to create something. Just this morning, actually, I was doing some user testing with somebody had built a prototype on Marvel. And it was pretty good. I mean, it looked like a real website. So you can make things look real and have people use them and click through.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi. So it's a multi-part question, but
Sure.
I guess the first part is you get both qualitative and quantitative feedback from user testing. So how do you balance those two? And the second part is what type of metrics should we be looking at quantitatively to like make a decision on what's the best like design to go for?
So in terms of metrics, I mean, looking both at the qualitative and the quantitative, because the qualitative is more telling you the what, right? You want to know why people are doing things too. You just don't want to know the what. The why is really important. Our behaviors and having an understanding of that is very, very important. So it's both. And depending on what you're like, the classic design answer is it depends, because depending on what you are looking for, right, in terms of your business goal, the metrics will change, right? Because you may want to see an increase in user engagement in one part of a site and not the other. I don't really know what your specific goal is, but if you tell me, I think my stuff is gone, but I have cards I can give you. You can email me if you're looking for something specific. Anyone else? Okay, thank you so much. Oh, wait, one more.
What are some resources we can use to learn more about UX?
Resources you can, you could Google anything, right? But I would say I personally like the book Lean UX, because I feel it's something that it's a thin book, and it's something that everybody can use, and you can incorporate Lean UX into your business strategy. And it's just a way of incorporating user testing, prototyping early on. And Don't Make Me Think by Steve Krug. If you have not read that book, and you're designing stuff or you're making stuff, you need to read that book. Don't Make Me Think by Steve Krug. It's a great book.